All right, there's a couple things that I would like to go over today. We skipped over impeachment, and then I would like to compare the House and the Senate. Let's start with impeachment. Some of this stuff is review for you because we've talked about this when President Trump was being impeached earlier, but let's go through it again. Let's get our notes here on impeachment. First of all, the Constitution says that a president, a vice president, and federal judges can be impeached. And when it comes to impeachment, you can be impeached for treason, bribery, high crimes, and misdemeanors. Now, these are things that we've talked about before when we looked at the Supreme Court. Remember, Supreme Court justices can be impeached. So, treason would be crimes against your country, bribery would be taking money in exchange for uh, some kind of power. Like if I'm a judge who takes a bribe in order to rule a certain way. High crimes, I guess, would be felonies, and then misdemeanors are less serious crimes. So it says you can be impeached. It doesn't say you will be impeached. Excuse me. What we didn't really look in too much is the role of Congress. I guess we did talk about this some. But when it comes to impeachment, the House of Representatives votes to impeach, and it takes a majority vote. So impeachment to impeach someone means that you're bringing up charges. Um, so President Trump was impeached. Charges were brought up against him. And after someone has been formally impeached, then it goes to trial, and the Senate holds the trial. They serve as a jury of the trial. It happens in the Senate, excuse me. They play the role of the jury, and it takes a two-thirds vote to convict in impeachment. So, again, President Trump was impeached by the House of Representatives. He was tried, and the Senate did not convict him. If somebody would be convicted in impeachment, the most that the punishment can be is to be kicked out of office and prevented from holding any future political offices. um, you can't be sent to prison for that because impeachment is not a criminal proceeding. But if somebody is impeached for something and kicked out of office, they could be tried in criminal court for that same offense. Um, that's essentially impeachment. You can look at these as are some of the past impeachment ones. What, but when it comes to Congress, members of Congress cannot be impeached. However, Congress can and does set their own rules. Like the House has rules for the conduct of their um, people, and if they break those rules, they can be kicked out of Congress. And the same thing for the Senate. So the Constitution gives them the authority to set the rules and punishments for violating those rules. That's pretty much impeachment. Now, I apologize. I'm not sick, I just have a hoarse voice today. The other thing I want to go over today is the comparison of the House and the Senate. The House and the Senate have a lot of similarities. I mean, they're both part of Congress. They make up Congress, I guess. They share many of the same rules or same of the powers, but there are some differences between the House and the Senate. So let's kind of go through these. First of all, term of office. House is elected for a 2-year term. The Senate is elected for a 6-year term. And then who they represent. The House of Representatives represents their district. And if a state has many districts and then many different House members, each House member is only representing approximately 750,000 people, where senators represent the entire state. Now, in states like South Dakota, again, Dusty Johnson, our member of the House of Representatives, represents the entire state because we only have one district. But in states with many districts, there is a difference between who they represent. Total number, 100 members of the Senate, 435 members of the House. How old you have to be is a little bit different, 25 in the House and 30 in the Senate. Also, how long you have to be an American citizen and so on. So the qualifications are slightly different. A major difference here is equal representation versus proportional representation. The House is based on proportional representation. Remember, the more populated a state is, the more members of the House that state gets. The Senate, every state gets 2. Both of them have power positions. The Speaker of the House is the power position in the House of Representatives. In the Senate, technically the vice president is the head of the Senate, but remember they can only break a tie. So the majority leader is really the power position in the Senate. When it comes to impeachment, they play different roles. We just covered the impeachment thing, a minute ago. Yesterday, when you looked at uh, how a bill becomes a law, we looked at that the House does not allow filibusters, but the Senate does. And remember, a filibuster is basically trying to prevent a vote on a bill by, well, really, in the old days, talking it to death. Now, just preventing a vote from being held. When it comes to a couple of other powers, the Senate has the power to confirm judges, remember, with a majority vote, and to ratify treaties with a two-thirds vote. The House doesn't have any of those powers. So when it comes to comparing the House and the Senate is a little bit more prestigious. You're one of 100 members versus one of 435. You have a 6-year term versus a 2-year term. You represent the entire state rather than a smaller district. So in most states, you represent a bigger portion of society. Um, you know, they play different roles in impeachment, but they also have the power to confirm judges and to ratify treaties. The Senate does. So the Senate is a little bit more prestigious of an office today than I think members of the House are. There are some things that are, they're shared powers. Both are elected by the people of the state. Both represent the state. Now, granted, the House represents their district first and then the state, but they still both represent the state. And the enumerated powers, the power to declare war, to coin money, to borrow money, to tax, those are things that have to go through both the House and the Senate, basically through the bill lawmaking process, which we covered, a day or two ago. So those enumerated powers are all shared by both the House and the Senate. So a lot of similarities between them. And when it comes to like a lawmaking process, they do the same stuff in the lawmaking process. So they are both part of the legislative branch. They're both considered part of Congress, obviously, then. And even though there's a lot of similarities between the two, there are some differences too. And I think this is not any new information. This is just all things that maybe to have a clearer picture of how the House and the Senate are similar and different. All right, that's all at least for this video. Um, we'll talk to you soon.